I feel like we've made it. We have made it to final winter. We had an absolutely gorgeous weekend and it was fun. Actually went and watched my daughter and son play flag football, which was funny to watch and enjoyable. We were at Spring Canyon Park, which just is an absolutely gorgeous park, huge. And if you're parked on the wrong parking lot, can be a long walk from one side to the other. But this coming weekend, we do have some cold weather coming and possible snow showers. But it's kind of like this last hurrah for winter, hopefully. You know, the rule of thumb is always don't plant your flowers before Mother's Day. And so we're coming close to that. But this is live in Fort Collins every Monday. We're coming to you live, 12 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. If you're watching this show live, feel free to comment, ask questions, engage. This is the time that I can answer in real time. If you're watching this on a rerun, leave a comment below and I will get back to you as best I can with as best of answer as I can. But that being said, we talked to you guys about things that have happened over the previous week, things that are happening, and then also talk about what's going on with City Council and if there are any fun developments under review. Specifically over the last few weeks, we've seen more and more ADU, preliminary conceptual designs coming through the design review process. So definitely people are exploring that. But the focus for today will be when we talk about the City Council work session. They had an electric vehicle readiness roadmap. And the last time they updated that was in 2018, and they are currently updating it. And so there was some discussion around issues, problems, challenges, kind of where we're at, where we're going. And so we'll talk about that here at the end, as well as talk about our zero waste initiative by 2030 and making sure that our most vulnerable pieces of our population in Fort Collins are being serviced and not forgotten for sure. So we'll go over those three things shortly. But let's see here. 2 CSU graduate programs ranked in the top 3 in the United States. And I'm proud to say that my wife, which by the way, I did I was cleaning out our storage closet and putting in definitely, organizing it, clearing it out, cleaning it up. And she had like 5 boxes worth of awards and recognitions and medals and to my shoebox, essentially. So definitely she's a pretty impressive person. But then on top of all of her athletic achievements, she was also a graduate of the occupational therapy program at CSU, which was just ranked in the top 3 in the United States for graduate programs. Additionally, the veterinary medicine program, which CSU has always been known for that, always been a top school across the nation. We actually have a client right now who is moving here from out of state, whose niece is wanting to be in the vet school at CSU. And so they're making a move here to Northern Colorado for that program. And that's a conversation we probably have at least 3 to 5 times a year of, my daughter, son, granddaughter, grandson, whatever, niece, nephew are moving into or going to CSU for their vet school. And we want to be near or by them for that. So congratulations, CSU, specifically their vet medicine school and occupational therapy. A couple updates on those 2 programs. When my wife was going there, it was just a master's degree that they were offering. Now they're offering, I think it's like a professional doctorate program. And so instead of 2 years, it's 3 years to go through that school. But it's one of the few programs in the United States that actually offers some hands-on experience, which my wife, when she was going there, she had an intern at her current work. So she's been at her current work location for 14 years. So a good long while, which was the opportunity presented to her by going through this program. She said that they've always been ranked in the top 10, but they moved up from number 7 to number 3 last year. So it's always good to see a CSU performing well. For all you pickleballers out there, the Pickler broke ground at Jessup Farms on April 7th. So sooner than later, that will be a 27,000 square foot facility, 10 court pickleball facility. It is, I believe, a franchise, the Pickler. There's going to be, it'll be a pretty cool place for Fort Collins. It'll be Fort Collins's first indoor pickleball specific facility, because there's people who play at the Senior Center and Fort Collins Club or, Genesis, but this will be Fort Collins' first pickleball facility. And there's one other slated to go on Innovation Drive over by Cruise, indoor, outdoor. And then also the city of Fort Collins is doing a feasibility study on an outdoor pickleball court facility with 12 courts. So for all you pickleballers out there, things are happening. Okay, Harmony Roadwork. We've got starting today, 5 weeks of lane closures. They're re-asphalting from College Avenue to McMurray, which was essentially where they ended last year. They did Timberline all the way to I-25. Looks great. It was a pain in the butt. What happened was that Trilby and Carpenter got absolutely flooded with traffic. So if you are commuting to on I-25 to Windsor, Johnstown, make sure to plan accordingly for these next 5 weeks, because Harmony Road is going to be a pain in the butt, and you're going to have alternative routes that are a little bit more bottlenecked. I talked with a client that was considering moving here, and one of the things they are considering moving here from kind of the Los Angeles area. Traffic's a big issue, and don't get me wrong, traffic in Fort Collins is definitely worse than it was, but depending on where you're coming from and what your perspective is and what your background is, the traffic in Fort Collins is generally not too bad. Most people ask what traffic. And I think a big reason for that is because we live on a grid system. So we have like 5 or 6 main arteries going north and south. And then we also have 5 or 6 main arteries going east and west, which helps offload some of that kind of major congestion. We were just at a really fun place in Greeley this weekend for my nephew's birthday, the Family Funplex, I think is what it was called in Greeley. But it was there was basketball courts, playgrounds, there was a lazy river, slides, swimming pools, like kind of a Great Wolf Lodge, but like on a much smaller scale, and very, very affordable too, which was really pretty cool. But I was just, when you go into Greeley, there's Highway 34 and there's the Highway 34 business pass. And I'm just like, man, this is just like it's a highway, but it feels like an interstate going there. And I think, it's great that Fort Collins doesn't really have that. As Timnath is growing and Fort Collins on the east side is growing in Windsor, it might feel like that eventually, that these cities are kind of one, and we do have an interstate going through. That could very well be the case. But Fort Collins definitely feels like a little bit buffered away from that. We do have US 287 that's kind of going up and down the middle, but these arteries going east and west, north and south are really what offloads some of this traffic. And so when we have a major artery like Harmony closed down, the other ones kind of get a little bit more full, bottlenecked, and traffic becomes a thing. So plan for that for the next 5 weeks, but it will look great. Harmony Road, they do a great job, long-term road planning and management. I think I've told this story a few times when I was driving into Brighton last year, and not to keep throwing Brighton under the bus, but it's just kind of the only example that comes to mind. When I was driving into Brighton, there was just potholes after potholes, and you're kind of like dodging them, going left and right. And that's one thing that, moving around Fort Collins, you don't see a lot of. Not that you don't see any of specifically, and I hope they fix this because they're doing a massive renovation right now, is Genesis South at Miramont. I mean, their parking lot is horrendous. Like, it just feels like it's falling into the earth. Speaking about Harmony Road, this Saturday, I saw this massive boat driving east on Harmony, and it's seemingly coming from Horsetooth. But as of April 1st, there are some boat ramps and docks that have opened up at Horsetooth Reservoir. So if that's your jam, if that's what you're looking at doing, you enjoy doing it, it is open and out for the public. This weekend, I was doing a renovation project. I am not very handy, but I'm trying. I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to do better and get better. But I was working on some shelves and some storage systems in my storage room downstairs. And there was a very kind, nice gentleman who we crossed paths at Home Depot, and he was asking me about, different neighborhoods, where they currently live, what their kind of future plans are, and was asking me about the Glade Reservoir and kind of what the ETA of that could be, and would property be out there, be valuable and worthwhile exploring. And I said, I do think the Glade Reservoir is happening. It will be a motorized boat recreational opportunity, Northwest Fort Collins, and those in Bellevue, LaPorte, Livermore are going to be right next to some phenomenal recreation as far as like what Horsetooth Reservoir is to Fort Collins. But I do think it's going to be 10, 15 years down the road. So, long-term planning, yeah, it could be definitely something pretty cool. Current planning, though, is, it's a ways out for sure. But Carter Lake, Horsetooth Reservoir, and then you do have Lake Loveland, but Lake Loveland's private, so you gotta own basically on Lake Loveland to be able to use that as a motorized boat opportunity. But Boyd Lake, Carter Lake, Horsetooth Reservoir are our 3 motorized lakes in and around Fort Collins. All right, let's jump into, and I'm going to share my screen here for our EVs discussion and city council breakdown. I will try to look back. Actually, I'm going to do this because I think it's a better strategy. Come on. All right. Share screen. Go here. Share. All right, here we go. All right. So City of Fort Collins in 2018 did an electric vehicle readiness roadmap. It was kind of head in the sky, really. There was definitely, obviously, electric vehicles out and they were coming, but there was only about 600 vehicles in Fort Collins, electric vehicles in Fort Collins in 2018. Whereas today there's over 5,000, I think nearing 6,000 electric vehicles. But how are we building our infrastructure and our plan and our what have been challenges and things that and what do we need to address? So first of all, an all-electric vehicle versus a plug-in hybrid, and then a hybrid electric, which actually just runs on gas, and then it gets charged by its gas charges its battery. We're just talking about a plug-in hybrid and an all-electric. Let's see here. One of the things that they want to talk about is equity and making sure that multifamily, multi-dwelling apartment complexes and mobile home parks and things of that nature are not forgotten, because there can be this mental barrier of cost and things of that nature. So they want to make sure that we're including that in addition to kind of looking at our entire transportation holistically. So public transportation, e-bikes, e-scooters, car sharing, and everything along those lines. Okay. All right. So here are some of our goal areas. Again, mobility. So looking at it as an entire kind of holistic approach. Equity, making sure that we're not forgetting about the multifamily maybe lower income areas that might get overlooked because the mentality that EVs are, super expensive and things of that nature. Big push is obviously environmental. We do have carbon emission goals. So this is a big opportunity as far as electric vehicles to impact those numbers. Utility grid infrastructure. So how are we building level 2 and level 3 chargers? Level 3 are chargers that basically charge your car in like 20 minutes versus level 2 charges it in like, an hour to 8 hours, much slower, a little bit more affordable. But how is our infrastructure set up for that? Residential charging, making sure that multifamily rental properties and single family houses are getting the right, addressing that. And then policy as well. Sometimes, downtown properties specifically either don't have a garage, which if you don't have a garage, it's really difficult to bring in an electric vehicle charger. So then you have to start getting a little bit creative So trying to build policy around how that might look. There was some, they put out a questionnaire that was pretty robust. And it was about a 30-minute questionnaire, but I thought it was kind of interesting. 84% of EV home chargers charge at home. Only less than 10% say they use public chargers on a weekly basis. So kind of an interesting, dilemma of like, okay, so we need a public charger, but the usage is not what maybe some would think or expect, or maybe it's just because there's not enough opportunity to charge that they just rely on their house. I am not an electric vehicle owner. I'm not opposed to it. I've got a lot of friends, not a lot of family, but a lot of friends who own EVs, and but we haven't had a ton of conversations around that. So let's see here. Okay. Let's keep going. These are some barriers, high purchase price, access for multifamily renters, lack of charging infrastructure. One of the things that they talked about that I thought was really kind of interesting is if you own an electric vehicle, it's kind of a mentality. Like you have to strategize your trips and your charging and understand what your need is. And if you are a heavy user, a single car family. And I was like, man, that's, probably not that hard once you get down to it. Honestly, you just get used to it and you kind of like program. But, I will say I did have, a client who was terrified moving here from, I think, Las Vegas. She was driving over I-70 and she had this, fear of running out of a charge going over the I-70 overpass. And I was like, yeah, I mean, that sounds like a legitimate fear. And I don't think she was coming during the winter, but it could have been. And I don't know, that kind of unreliable aspect of it is a little bit concerning. So not having the right infrastructure, local, regional, state, and national is a definite challenge. And it's just going to take time, it seems. Range anxiety, absolutely. All right. Let's see here. Cost of installation. So one of the things that happens, so there's level 2 and level 3 chargers, and there are private companies who put these chargers in place, and then they charge out like, for gas. They are charging a specific dollar per kilowatt hour that they provide to car owners. But specifically for capacity fees, needing to build out a 3-phase 480 volt service, I mean, you're talking like $100,000 for capacity and fees alone. And then the unit itself costs $75,000. So to put in one of these chargers, I believe that's a level 3 charger, is $175,000 plus. And so there's just not a great ROI on that. And there are providers that are avoiding Fort Collins in its entirety. And so conversations around, do we have to, and the individual that was talking about these EV chargers was like, hey, listen, like our power grid and everything like that, this is what it requires for us to install this. And these are real costs for us. $100,000 are real costs for us to provide these, charging stations. So, quite a bit. Now, I guess, if you kind of play it out, I mean, shoot, I'm watching King Soopers get built right now, that gas station by King Soopers. And I mean, it's pretty intensive. I mean, it's definitely more than $270,000 or $175,000. So I guess if you're looking at it from that perspective, you don't get the convenience store, but it's definitely expensive to build gas stations as well. We're just kind of used to it. And so maybe there's an opportunity in the return. So anyways, I thought that was really interesting that was the cost of building out these chargers. I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. The cost for a full charge at home is about $3. So if you plug in, charge it for 8 hours, it's about $3. Now, if you were to go to a level 3, or essentially what they're calling kind of, I believe, level 3 / supercharger. Now, I believe the supercharger is specific to Tesla, but if you go to a level 3 or supercharger, it's $30 to $50 for a full charge. So now for our van, which is be similar as far as like tank capacity, which is about 20 gallons, it costs about $60 to fill up the gas tank. So not a ton of savings in that regard. There is a difference between a level 2 charge, which is only about $15. So if you're able to sit there, maybe plug it in at work, or plug it in, walk away, come back a few hours later, that's only going to be about $15. But again, a level 3 public charge is going to be about $50. What about installing at your house? Now, a lot of our new builds, developments are coming with electric vehicle charging capability, not the actual charger, but the electrical power and outlet is essentially there. It just needs to be, the charger needs to be installed. So for that, it would only be about $300 to $500 for that charger to be installed in your wall. But we did have a client that bought a house in Brown Farm, and they were only at 100 amp service. So they did have to increase their electrical service, change out, I don't know if they had to replace the box, but they had to update the box, upgrade the box, I believe. And, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars there, and then the charger on top of that. So, and I do believe there's a lot of different, or at least there was, I'm not sure, with all the kind of different, funding polls and things of that nature, especially with around EVs and greenhouse stuff. So don't know how much of those are going to stick around, or go away. But there was a lot of credits and financial considerations to help offset some of these costs, because you go and buy a $40,000 EV or $50,000, $60,000, or $100,000 Tesla truck, and then you got to update your house, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to accommodate for the charging of that EV, and then make all of these accommodations within your life of like, okay, we're going to go on a road trip, or we're going down to Denver for the day. I didn't charge it last night, so we're gonna have to stop. Anyways, it seems like it's some challenges for sure. Not to say that we're not going to address them head on. We talked about the downtown area due to garage space is a challenge, and working with policy on that. Here's some good, interesting information. We have 5,300 vehicles in Q1 of 2025 were EVs. Now, but 20% of new vehicle purchases in Fort Collins are EVs, and statewide is 25.3%, which is the #1 state for market share of new EVs, surpassing California, but California's numbers are much higher just because they have a higher population. So I thought that was really interesting. I did just put out a question on our community page. I said, how many level 2 and 3 chargers are in Fort Collins? And here's your answer, 153. And here they are in Fort Collins. So here are all of the chargers. There's, the yellow ones are our super level 3 chargers. And I think one's out here, kind of on the east side of I-25. But you got chargers all over the place. Now, one thing that's interesting to note, there's some chargers that have X's on them. And I don't know, 3 offline right here. There was an interesting stat. So one of the things, in addition to your $100,000 capacity fee, your $75,000 unit fee to install, then you have ongoing maintenance that seems to be forgotten. And these private companies don't necessarily have the infrastructure in place to come and make repairs needed on these units. And there was a statistic that said 1 in 3 charging stations is down due to maintenance across the United States. So, there is definitely some hurdles to overcome, not just in Fort Collins, nationwide. But again, it's not to say that we shouldn't necessarily address them. It's just a matter of how we do it, and also make sure that, it's being addressed kind of with a rational mind, because we'll talk here shortly about our zero waste infrastructure plan by 2030 in Fort Collins, and like it's not going to happen. And so I think part of this revamping our EV readiness roadmap is kind of making more rational goals and processes and timelines, because it just we don't want to have a set a goal that maybe audacious, but maybe attainable at the same point. Here's our charging infrastructure. So our number of EVs now is at 5248, and here's what we're needed for our chargers. Let's see here. Did they say? Yeah, here we go. Recommended. So we have 147 public level 2 ports, but we have 166 to 255 recommended. Currently, we have 6 level 3 ports, and they're recommending 16 to 26. So it'll be interesting to see how we kind of meet and marry those. Okay, let's see here. The next one is zero waste. Okay. Here we go. Oh, that's weird. All right. So our next stop in our city council work session, and our final one, is going to be improve human and social health for vulnerable populations. But this is our update on our Accelerate to Zero Waste. We have a zero waste goal by 2030. And something that was interesting to note, even the best communities in the world are only reaching about 85% of waste allocation. And zero waste is essentially just saying no waste is going to the landfill. It's all just being distributed differently to composting, reusing, recycling, all of that. So it's diverting waste away from the landfill. This is our 2030 numbers, diversion, and we're only about 25% diversion rates in 2023 for residential, 40%, 82%. And what's also super interesting about this, and Carolyn Mitchell, actually, when I worked for Old Town Square Properties, was going through the cardboard ordinance back in 2012 and 13. I met with her, which would have been in her first year or two working for the city, but she kind of heads this program, and she was kind of leading that. And she does say that Fort Collins is doing a great job. We can do better, but we're doing an absolutely great job, meeting this head on. But also that 85% is like the gold standard, and it's hard to get from 85% to 100%. So this is an example of a goal that might need to be adjusted to, like what Kelly Olson suggested was that we say almost zero waste. And I think the intentionality behind it is important, because right now we're talking about we've passed the plastic bag ordinance. There's the styrofoam ordinance that I believe is a part of that, but is kind of being implemented. Single-use plastic bottles is a conversation that's going on right now as well. Here's how we are doing. Oh, what I was going to say is Carolyn Mitchell said that one thing that's kind of interesting across metros is how they are calculating the diversion. Is it by weight? Is it by, there's no standard formula for this across cities. So all of these numbers can kind of be skewed a little bit. Fort Collins, and these are kind of the best communities in Colorado that are trying to divert waste from their landfills, and what their percentages are. Loveland's kind of the gold standard. And one of the things that she said actually is that it's a lot of the yard trimmings. And since, I think we'll talk about it here soon. Yeah, we'll get to it. But since our adoption of a single hauler trash hauler, they have included yard clippings for each residence, which is a big contributor to landfill and waste. And now it's being diverted. So So it's kind of, I'm kind of, reusing and diverting and how it's recycled. Anyways, here is what's in our landfill waste. This was in 2016. Let's see here. Community diversion, percent of materials forecasted. So we're hoping to we're right currently now at around 61%. And we're hoping to get up to 75%. Our goal is 0, but we're hoping to get up to 75%. And that's if we can get all 3 of these, city industrial waste, yard trimmings, and construction and demolition kind of underway. All right. Detached residential. Okay. Like we talked about, plastic ban, paper bag fee, styrofoam, education and outreach. We do have a Timberline Recycling Center. Then this is a council priority. 46% more households now have curbside collection for yard trimmings, 11,400 homes. I want to talk about one of the things that I thought was interesting, and on our channel, and I would say comments, has been, I believe something that I don't know. I personally don't know, but they say, if there's even a little bit of contamination in your recycling, it just all goes to trash. And like, I think one person even commented that only 10% of what's recycled goes to recycling. The rest just gets dumped into the trash. And she was pretty hard on that, saying that used to be the case, but now because of how things are done, that isn't necessarily the case. So there is a lot of educational desire for the city to give its residents, saying, hey, listen, like, we're actually doing a pretty good job. Make sure that you stick with it. And like Loveland, they're used to doing their yard trimmings and disposing of those properly. And then our construction and demolition, a lot of that material gets reused. But right now in city, and Kelly Olson was really frustrated. He goes, why have I been talking? We've been talking about this since like 2005, when we first started talking about, construction and demolition facility and getting zero waste, but nothing seems to be happening. And the conversation that was had was, well, right now it's a regional issue because it's the Larimer County landfill. It's not the city of Fort Collins landfill. And that is composed of Fort Collins and Loveland and Red Feather and, all these different counties in Larimer County. So if we were to build a composting facility, because right now the closest one's about 60 miles away, and there are 2 haulers in Fort Collins that you can subscribe to. I do believe it's relatively expensive if you want to compost or dispose of your composting goods. And then additionally, on our construction and demolition, building a facility for that specifically. And the conversation is like, should we just do this ourselves? Are we at a point that we should just stop waiting for this collaboration and just build a city of Fort Collins specific construction and demolition? And so those are conversations that will be had in the near term future. Because right now we're feasibility analysis for our construction and demolition, as well as composting. And then we've still got a ways to go pathway, site selection, engineering and design, and construction. So they're talking like at the earliest 2029, which was a little bit frustrating to some of the people that were at city council. But again, I don't think Fort Collins, if we build it ourselves, we're going to have to eat that cost. That's going to have to come from somebody. If we have it as a county, we can share the cost across that, build a bigger facility. So here's the kind of the development, compost, and C&D infrastructure all the way up to 2029 and beyond. I think that is, yep. So that's it. And then the final thing was improving human and social health for vulnerable populations. We start at 101. So Fort Collins is a very affluent area. And I think it can be overlooked at times that there are still low income areas, people who are living below the poverty line that hopefully don't get forgotten. But the only way that happens is with intentionality from city council, the community members at large. So we have a priority to not forget them, making sure that we are addressing their needs. Now, speaking of addressing their needs, unfortunately, ARPA went away, and that was about $1 million that was helping for homeless human services and homeless funding. So between we have human services, homeless response. I do not know at CDBG public services. I couldn't tell you what that is. I can't remember. But we have $1 million less towards human services and homelessness funding this year versus last year without our ARPA funding. It was this ARPA, I believe. Okay, here's one thing that we actually did fund in our budget this year. Comparatively, the GF is general fund. And it was on ARPA, but we did put it into our budget from there. All right, 106. Additionally, one of the things that, and these are things that like are that I learn is, a lot of maybe mobile home or manufactured home parks are built next to or near oil facilities because it's like, well, it's cheap land. Somebody's going to live here. And so it's kind of, a vulnerable population. Well, at least in Fort Collins, Prospect Energy shut down in August of 2024, and we're working on buying those and reclamating those properties. And then from there, they're trying to educate these individuals about air quality and environment and things of that nature. So the good thing is that 90% of this participant feedback said that they know more about indoor air quality. 70% have said their overall health has improved, and 93% would recommend this program to a friend. So making sure that we're getting in front of those individuals. I thought this was pretty cool. In 2024, the city's mobile home park program repaired 37 mobile homes with roofing, flooring, decking. They hosted 5 resource fairs, and I thought this was kind of interesting. I don't know how helpful this would be per se, but taught 350 senior and primary Spanish-speaking mobile home park residents DIY skills like plumbing and power tool use. I'm like, well, yeah, but power tools are expensive. So maybe they can go rent them or borrow them and then know how to use them. But I'm like, man, let's make sure that we're given resources that make sense, because I can say power tools are definitely expensive. And just because I can use one doesn't mean I can actively resource it when I need it. Okay, we're going to go down to 111. This is, again, what was part of the ARPA fund, Immigration Legal Fund, and the Eviction Legal Fund, which is now part of our 2025 budget. And, they had they served 1,100 renters. They served 49 eviction mediations, 136 clients for attorney represented clients for non-in-court appearances, and then 108 landlords served as well. Immigration fund, these are 2 really important funds City of Fort Collins felt to take on and put into our budget, which is really pretty cool. All right, 113. Here's just some kind of numbers for you as well on utilities affordability program. So there's an affordability program for utilities. 1,700 households were enrolled. They've distributed $51,000. And then they, for an emergency fund, they are estimating $86,000 and serving 292 households. So essentially, they're helping individuals with utility fees. I can't remember what it is called, but there are programs for that. And then additionally, it's the Get FOCO. I believe it's an app. The Get FOCO app has 5 different programs in there, all under one roof, which is the grocery tax rebate, recreation reduced rate, connections reduced rate, spin access, and the gardens at Spring Creek. There are a lot of households that are adopting this and getting involved. So it is income restricted, income qualified. So if that is something that you're interested in, the Get FOCO app is something that is pretty cool that the City of Fort Collins is doing. Well, that is it for City Council work session. What can you do this upcoming weekend? Well, talking about zero waste and yard clippings, we have in Fort Collins a free mulch day. And that is this Saturday, April 19th from 8 to 3 p.m. And it's going to be at 1380 Mill Road. And this is essentially courtesy of the Forestry Division. So any trees and trees that they have to cut down, they mulch up. It is for residents only, but you can go and essentially fill up with some free mulch. And I can tell you that my wife was wanting to do some yard work this weekend, and unfortunately my truck was packed because we were clearing out our basement, and she goes, well, it's X dollars per bag, and it's a good deal. So it must be expensive enough to be worthwhile exploring free mulch day this Saturday. So we talked about pickleball. Well, what about cornhole? Well, there is a cornhole league starting tomorrow and going through May 20th at the Exchange. And the Exchange has a really pretty cool courtyard scene, but it's $50 per team, which is 2 players, and they meet on Tuesday nights at 6:30 p.m. It is open beverage at the Exchange, so you can walk anywhere within the Exchange and have open your beverage open. You don't have to have it closed. Folks did the half marathon this last weekend, which I am not about running. There is a buddy of ours from the Genesis that's running in the Boston Marathon this Saturday, which is really exciting for him, and he does a phenomenal job. But if you're interested, on April 19th, there is a 5K, 10K, and half marathon in Severance, Colorado. I'm going to show you guys. Let's see here. Stop screen. Share screen. Come on. There we go. Entire screen. Here are, right here, the maps. So this is the 5K. This is in Severance. Let's see here real quick so you guys can kind of have like an idea of where this is. Oh, come on. Harmony Road. This is kind of like the, that's kind of cool. This is Harmony Road, and then here's Fort Collins. So it's in Severance, Colorado, and that's the 5K. Now, what about the 10K? Again, Harmony Road is just right there, and they start over here, and you're running on a trail, pea gravel, and here's the half marathon route, which takes you basically all the way to Eaton or near Eaton. So if you're into that, that is this weekend, $16 to $75. And then finally, we have had some clients in the past who have talked about retirement plans and what they are going to do for retirement. And a couple have in my 5 years, so only about 2. So only 2 in the 5 years that I've been doing this. I've talked about wanting to be a volunteer for the trolley and ride the trolley all summer long. And that could be what they do in their retirement days. Well, if that is you and you're interested in that, April 19th, 1 to 2 p.m., you can go learn on how to be a volunteer for the Fort Collins trolley. So that is it for today. I don't see any questions, any comments. Appreciate you guys joining on a weekly basis. Like I said, there was a very nice, kind gentleman who saw me in Home Depot. If you ever do see me, definitely don't hesitate to say hi. It's been great to meet a lot of people who have watched the show over the last 5 years, and nothing but kindness has been in those conversations. So I appreciate that. If you don't like me, if you hate me for whatever reason, just kind of keep walking. All right. I don't need that in my life, but otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day. Appreciate you guys watching. Take care.